Hello, I'm Waffles Are Better. This is the second video in a tutorial series on how to create your own fully custom dimension in Minecraft using a data pack. In this video, I will be showing you how to create custom dimensions that don't actually look exactly like the overworld. If you haven't seen the first video, you should definitely check that out because there's stuff I'll be doing in this video that you'll have to have watched the previous video to understand. And so there's a link to that in the description. So for this video, I will be using the same data pack that I made in the last video, which was part 1 of this series. This is part 2. If you haven't seen that, I recommend you go check that out because it tells you how to set up a regular vanilla layered dimension, whereas this video will be demonstrating how you can create dimensions with other biome source types. The first of these is the most simple. I'm just going to create a copy and then paste it in here and rename it to the frost underscore end because I'm going to be using the end world generator. So for the end generation, basically it'll just create a dimension like the end with the main end island with the end biome in the middle and then the different end biomes in a circle around it. But there is no large biome setting, so you have to delete that, and then you need to change the type to the underscore end. And so what this will do is it'll create a dimension with the type that I have specified in the dimension type folder, and then the biome seed 0 with the biome generation type as the end, and then the dimension seed 0 with noise generation settings from the overworld and a type of Minecraft noise. And for this example, the type does need to be Minecraft noise. The other types are flat and debug, and I will go into those in a later video. And the settings determine, like, for example, how structures and different things like that generate. So you could change this to the end or to a custom noise settings file that you make, which I will also go into in the future. But I'm going to keep this as the overworld. So that will generate structures and land the way the overworld specifies, but it won't generate overworld structures like villages. It will still generate structures like end cities, because that's specified by biome. If you want your dimension to generate in islands, and not just with the end biomes in the right places, then you should set this to the underscore end. But if you want it to generate with hills, but the ground is made of endstone, and it has the end structures, then it's fine to keep the overworld. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's it for the end biome source, but next I'm going to create another dimension, and again I'm just going to copy and paste the dimension I already have, and then for this one I'm going to rename it to the frost fixed, because that is the generation type that we're going to be using. So you need to change this to fixed, and then add a comma after it, and then in here you want to type biome in quotation marks with a colon after it, and then a space, and then another set of quotation marks, and then the name of the biome that you want your entire world to be. So I'm going to write ice spikes, because that's my favorite biome, and that's all you need to do for this dimension. It will just generate as a world that is completely made up of a singular biome, whatever you specified here. So then, again, I'm just going to paste the same dimension that I've already copied in here and rename it to Checkerboard. And for this one, I'm going to set the type from the end to Checkerboard. And then after that, you need a comma. And then what you need to put here is biomes. And that is, again, in quotation marks with a colon after it, and then square brackets. And in here, you need to put a list of the different biomes you want your world to have, and there needs to be 3 or more of these. So, for example, for me, I want to put ice spikes, and then a comma after that, and then, let's say, you know what, I'm just going to do the mushroom field shore, and then I also want to do maybe a frozen river. Actually, for good measure, I'm going to put in a 4th one, and maybe modified jungle edge. And then these are going to be my biomes. And then after your biomes, you can put a comma, and then in quotation marks again, scale, then after the quotation marks a colon, and then a number. And this will determine how big each of the checkerboard squares are. So each square will be a specific biome, and the biomes will repeat in a pattern throughout the entire dimension. When you increase the scale, you increase the biome size exponentially. So 0 is just one chunk, and then 1 is 2 chunks by 2 chunks, so 4 chunks for each biome. And then 2 is 4 chunks by 4 chunks. And then 3 is 8 chunks by 8 chunks. And 4 is 16 chunks by 16 chunks, and so on. So I'm just going to leave mine at 1, so that way each biome will be 2 chunks by 2 chunks. The next biome source type is actually the one that I'm going to be using for my custom dimension in future videos. So I'm going to go ahead and rename my original dimension to the frost_vanilla, because it's a vanilla layered dimension. Then what I want to do is to I just want to copy this and paste it in here, because again, I'm making another dimension. And this I'm just going to rename to the frost, because it's going to be what I'm going to be using in the future. So again, for the biome source, we don't want large biomes because that's only a parameter for the vanilla layered. And then you need to change this to multi_noise. So the next thing you have to do here is actually to put in the parameters that determine how the biomes actually generate. So the way Minecraft generates its biomes and terrain is by using patterned images that are generated with noise functions. And it actually layers 4 different of these patterned images. So you have to tell the game how you want to generate the images. So basically the way that the game decides where each biome should be is where the different images overlap. The different values, for example, completely white might be 1, and black might be -1, and in between might be like 0.6 or something. If one of the patterns has a value of 0.6 in one point, and another has a value of 1 in one point, then it'll choose whichever biome has a value of 0.6 for the first map and 1 for the second map. This may be a bit confusing, and I don't know a lot about it, so if you want a video just about this, you should probably check out Slicedlime's video on this that I'll link in the description. And since he is actually a game developer, he really knows what he's talking about on this subject. But to specify how the noise map generates, you need to drop down a line and make sure you have a comma after the type, and then in quotation marks type altitude_noise, and then a colon, and then a curly bracket, and then drop down a line in here and type again in quotation marks first, and then capital O octave, and a colon. And this value, I believe, is the frequency of the noise function, and this will just determine at what place it takes the value to create the pattern, I believe. And so for default, this is set to -7, and so I'm just going to keep it like that. And then you have to drop down another line and type amplitudes, and then a colon, and then square brackets, and then drop down the square brackets. And I believe the amplitudes are for determining the range of the different values that can be generated in the noise map pattern. So again, the default is 1.0, and then a comma, and then 1.0 again. And so that's just what I'm going to leave it as. And then you can go ahead and copy everything in this altitude noise section, and then put a comma after it, and then paste it again underneath, and just change altitude noise to humidity noise, and then add another comma and paste it again, and then change altitude noise here to temperature noise, add another comma after that, and then paste it one last time, and change this one to weirdness noise. So basically, each one of these, the altitude, humidity, temperature, and weirdness noise, generate their own separate noise map. So in total, there are 4 different of these patterns overlapping each other, and each one basically has different values in a gradient to different places. So, as you'll see in a moment, each biome that you add to your world will have different values on each of these different maps. And so in the places where the right patterns overlap, that's where the biomes will actually generate. The actual names of these different maps don't actually mean anything. So you can use the first one for altitude, like to differentiate between mountains and plains maybe. And you can choose the second one for humidity to differentiate between oceans and deserts. And you can use the next one for temperature to differentiate between snowy biomes and deserts. And weirdness to differentiate between, for example, regular plains and the mushroom plains, because the mushroom plains are a weird version of the regular plains. So if you have a scale of different biome altitudes, they would generate in a gradient, so it would go from flatter terrain to higher terrain, like in the mountains, and that's what creates the more natural biome distribution that Minecraft has. For example, temperature and humidity. If you notice in your world that all the different ocean biomes generate together, and the different hot biomes like deserts and savannas generate together, that is because of the different noise settings. But as I said before, the actual name does not matter. For example, if you called altitude noise, like, for example, sliminess noise or something, you could have a gradient between like a custom biome made completely out of slime blocks to the least slimy biome, which would maybe be a desert, and in between, in the middle, could maybe be a swamp. And so at the highest sliminess value, it would generate the slime block biome, and about in the middle, where the map looks gray, it would generate the swamp biome, and when it's black, so it's not slimy at all, then it would generate a desert. So again, if you want a whole video on this, there's a link to Slicedlime's video in the description. But now it's time to actually add the biomes, so the biomes themselves will generate. Because right now I haven't specified any biomes to actually generate in my world. So to do that, all you need to do is drop down a line under multi-noise and just type biomes, then a colon, and then a square bracket, and then drop down in the middle of the 2 square brackets, and then make sure you put a comma after the last one. And then inside of the biomes, you want to make some curly brackets, and then in here, in quotation marks, write biome, then colon, and then in quotation marks again, the name of the first biome you want to generate. So I am going to put ice spikes, because again, that is my favorite biome, and then make sure you put a comma after your biome, and then drop down a line, and then here you want to put in quotation marks parameter, and then another colon. Then you want another curly bracket, and then here is where you're going to want to put the actual values for your biomes to generate on the different noise maps. So in quotation marks, altitude, and then a colon, and then a value between -1 and +1. And this will determine where it is placed on the altitude noise map. So since the ice spikes biome is relatively flat compared to mountains, but also a little taller and hillier than plains, I would put like plains and deserts as -1 on this scale, and +1 would be maybe like the shattered savanna, where it's the really, really tall mountains. So this would be maybe -0.8, and then you put a comma, drop down again, and the next noise map is humidity, so you want to put humidity, and then a colon. And then for humidity, stuff like oceans would be a +1, and stuff like deserts would be a -1, and maybe plains would be 0. So maybe for humidity, I'd want to do 0.5, because there's a lot of snow and ice there, but it isn't actually made out of water. And then if we go down here, the next one is temperature, and so you want to put temperature, and again, the hottest biome would be the nether biomes, and the coldest biomes would be the ice biomes. Since the ice spikes is a really cold biome, I'll maybe put -1, And then down here, weirdness. So, weirdness. I think the ice spikes is one of the weirdest biomes because it's got all of those spikes that no other biome really has. But it isn't as weird as the Mushroom Islands biomes, so maybe it's about a 0.8. Then the very last thing here is offset, and basically that determines how rare the biome is and how small it is. And this one, unlike the other ones, is not on a scale from -1 to +1, it's on a scale from 0 to 1. So this will mean that when the game places this, so on the altitude map with the closest value to -0.8, the humidity map as about 0.5, the temperature is about -1, and the weirdness at about -0.8. The offset will determine how close it has to be to exactly all of these values to generate. So for example, since beaches are a relatively small biome, they would have a relatively high offset, and since plains are a relatively common biome, they'd probably have an offset of about 0. So setting this to 1 might make it so it almost never generates. So I don't want to do that. I'll maybe set it to about 0.5 because I want it to not generate that often, but I still want it to generate like pretty often. So then all of this is done, and you just need to go ahead and add some more biomes. So just copy everything here, and then add a comma and paste it, and then I'm just going to change a few of these values and add some more biomes. So I've added a few more biomes, and I've also changed the temperature of the ice spikes because I wanted the snowy tundra to be colder. And there's actually a really helpful tool that you can use for choosing the different values for all these parameters, and also the octaves and amplitudes for the different noise map generators. So what this is Mesode's dimension data pack generator, and if I go to the page, and then you can just go ahead and copy everything you have in your file, and then just paste it over here on the side like this, and it'll just automatically put everything into the generator on the left side. Then if you go up here and click visualize, you can actually see how the biomes are going to generate in your world. And so, for example, this color is ice spikes, so each of these patches is going to be ice spikes. And I believe this number up here is showing the amount of chunks that it's showing, but I might be wrong about that. And as you can see, for the frozen river, I put an offset of 0.9. Now, it won't actually generate shaped like a river. As you can see, it'll just generate in patches. You'd have to do a lot more complicated stuff to get it to generate like a river, but this was just an example. So it'll just look like frozen over lakes. And so you'll see that when I go into this world, it's not going to really look like a regular world because I didn't do a good enough job with putting in enough biomes and assigning them the correct parameters, but this is just an example. So if you really want it to look great, which I will actually do later for my pack, then I'm planning on maybe making a video just completely on the parameters, the noise parameters here, and how to make your world look realistic. So as you can see, if I, like, for example, change the first octave for humidity noise, it'll just change how this ends up looking. And same with the amplitude octaves. If I change those, they will also change, but it'll change in different ways if I change the other parameters for other different noise generation. But I'm just going to keep this all the same. I didn't change anything, but if you did, you can just copy all of this and paste it back into your file. So that should actually be it. You need to make sure that you save all of your files, and then you can go ahead and actually put this in your game. So I'm just going to create a new world. I'm just going to name it biome source test, because I'm testing all the different biome source options. I'm going to make it creative, open the data pack folder, and then just go to my desktop where I have my data packs folder, and copy my data pack and paste it into the world. And then just make sure that I move it over to the selected column. And now I can just start to make sure that all the biomes worked. So I'm going to do /execute in to get the list of biomes. And first, I'm just going to go to the vanilla biome, which is the one we already had. Run TP and then these coordinates. And I have teleported to these coordinates in the vanilla biome. So, as you can see, this is just a normal ocean and some mountains and islands. It's just generating the way that a normal vanilla world would, but it's at nighttime and it's set to midnight because it is the frost dimension type. But this isn't that interesting. You don't really need to do that much work for this one. So let's explore one of the more interesting dimensions. So, I'm going to do the same command, except instead of the frost vanilla, I want to choose the one that's generated like the end. And so here I am. And as you can see, I made it generate like the overworld, but with the end biomes. I would have had to make the noise settings like the end instead of just the biome source. And if I do /locate end city, it should find some end cities pretty close by. Oops, I've gone inside of a block. But yeah, there's an end city here, even though I'm not in the end. I'm actually in the frost biome that it says at the top. So then, if I choose to go to the one that's a fixed biome, then as you can see, it should be all the ice spikes biome, because the fixed biome only chooses one biome. And let me just go back to spectator, and then I can just fly really fast, load a bunch of chunks, and everything around me should just be the ice spikes biome. But then if I go to the checkerboard, then the biomes will actually generate in a checkerboard pattern. And if you remember, I did the modified jungle edge, I believe, and frozen rivers, and ice spikes, and the mushroom field shore. So if I press F3 and G, I can see the chunk boundaries, and as you can see, each of these little checkerboards is exactly 4 chunks, which is 2 by 2, and that is because of the scale that I set it to. And if you'll notice, every single biome that I've been in, it's been midnight because I've used the frost dimension type, which I made in the previous video. Then let me just remove the chunk boundaries. I don't need to see those anymore. And now the last one is the last one we just made with the multi-noise setting. So this one should have a bit of all these different biomes. So as you can see, I'm currently in the snowy plains. But if I go over here, this is a frozen ocean. And what I should have done is add a beach biome that would generate between the frozen ocean and the snowy plains. But I didn't do that because, again, it's just an example. But as I fly around, you'll see that the 2 most common biomes are the snowy plains and the frozen ocean. And because of the values I chose for the different biome noise settings, these should generate in about the right places. So like, for example, there's this nice slope between these 2 biomes. This is actually some really interesting landscape, though. This is a cool dimension on its own. I guess this wouldn't generate like this in the overworld because there would be different biomes generating between this frozen ocean and the ice spikes. But since the ice spikes are a kind of elevated biome, there's just these steep cliffs leading into the frozen ocean, and I think that's really cool. But just moving around, the frozen river biome, I've only seen one patch of that so far. Doesn't seem to be that common. Again, there's a bit of weird generation here because I didn't do a perfect job. So this seems to be an iceberg in the middle of these this snowy plains, and that's because this biome right here is a frozen ocean, and then this biome right here is a frozen river. And as I said, it doesn't generate the right, it doesn't generate like a river because you would need to do a lot more messing with the different biome parameters to get it to generate like that. So instead we've got this frozen lake, and that's actually what I wanted. That's why I chose the frozen river. But that's it for this video. In the future I'll be going to stuff like structure generation, like villages, and even custom structures, and also super flat dimensions if that interests you. But that'll just be a short video because it's pretty easy to do. And I'll probably even do some videos on how to create custom portals to your dimension and stuff like that too. So if that interests you, then you can subscribe if you want. And if you have any questions about anything I've covered in this video, you can ask me those in the comments. And if you have anything else you want me to make a video on, you can give me those suggestions in the comments too, because I'd like to help you guys with things that you actually want help with. And someday, this dimension, the Frost, will look like a entirely new dimension. So again, if you want to be able to make your own completely new dimension completely from scratch, then you can just continue following this tutorial series. There's a link to download this pack in the description as an example if you want that to help get you started. Thanks for watching.